The plains stretched wide and merciless, their silence broken only by the rasp of wind dragging dust across the earth. Beneath that vast and indifferent sky moved a girl who carried too much weight for her small, trembling frame. Her belly swelled forward, pressing against the faded cotton of her dress, though she was but 13. She walked as though each step might give her away to the world, her shame written plain in the curve of her body, her eyes too weary for her years. Folks who saw her lowered their voices, but whispers traveled faster than hoofbeats. Every porch, every saloon bench, every church pew had her name folded into it. Clara May Hollister, the ruined girl. The story of her undoing was passed around like a jug, each sip making the tale harsher than the last. Her mother had vanished when Clara was still young, slipping away under moonlight. Her father, Jed Hollister, had raised her with a hand that was more callous than kindness. When he discovered the child inside her, his rage was colder than fire. He spat words of sin and disgrace, words that clung to Clara's skin like burrs she could never pick free. The night he told her to leave, he did not shout. He simply opened the door and stared at her until she understood. She carried only a blanket thin as paper in a tin cup. His boots echoed on the wooden floor as he turned away, and she felt the sound more than she heard it. Outside the town's edge, he set her down like unwanted freight, and there he left her. The lantern light of home, if it had ever been home, shrank behind her until it was swallowed by darkness. She sat in the dirt until dawn, waiting for him to return. He never did. When the sun rose, the world had already judged her. Men shook their heads. Women clutched their shawls tighter. A girl with child and no ring was nothing but a curse. She walked on, because what else was there? The prairie stretched before her, empty and unwelcoming. She had no map, no food, only the stubborn heartbeat within her ribs and the heavier one beneath it. Dust stung her eyes. Her lips cracked until they bled. Yet the small life inside her pressed on, reminding her she had no right to lay down and surrender. Nights came cold as a coffin. Clara huddled beneath cottonwoods, the blanket unable to keep out the chill. The ground bruised her hips, her back. She listened to coyotes singing in the dark and felt herself no better than prey. In the mornings the sun punished her, burning the last bit of strength from her skin. She drank from muddy streams, ate what roots and berries her hands could find, often spitting them out when they tasted of bitterness. The child within kicked, a sharp reminder that she was no longer only one life, but two. Days blurred. Her dress clung with sweat and dust until it seemed made of the land itself. Shame still clung too, heavier than hunger. Clara was not just lost. She was untethered, floating between worlds. She was not a child anymore, though her body was fragile as one. She was not yet a mother, though every breath carried her closer. The storm came like judgment. Clouds gathered, swollen black, and the sky split open with a sound like the world breaking. Lightning scarred the horizon. Rain beat against her face, soaking through the cloth of her dress until it dragged her shoulders. Clara stumbled, mud sucking at her feet, and when her knees gave way, she did not rise. Thunder cracked overhead, and her last thought was not of fear, but of surrender. Perhaps the earth would take her back and be kinder than people had been. When she woke, the world was different. The rain had passed, leaving the air sharp and clean. A fire smoldered close by, its smoke curling gentle as ribbon. Food sat on a flat stone, half a roasted rabbit, roots laid carefully beside it. And over her body lay a blanket, heavier and warmer than the one her father had allowed her to keep. She stirred, confused. Her heart kicked in alarm, searching the trees. There, just at the edge of shadow, half hidden, stood a man. His figure was tall, shoulders strong, his hair dark and braided. A scar carved across his cheek caught the light of the fire. An Apache, her frightened mind whispered, recalling every tale townsfolk told of raids and blood. But he did not approach. He only watched. His gaze was steady, unreadable. Clara's breath caught. She pulled the blanket tighter, unsure if it was shield or shackle. Yet when she looked back at the food, still steaming, she realized one truth. She had been spared the night. By the time she gathered the courage to blink, he was gone, leaving only the fire that she knew she had not lit. The flames crackled, as if whispering a secret. For the first time since she had been cast out, Clara May felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope, not yet, but the faint, bewildering sense that she was not entirely alone. Dawn bled soft gold across the canyon rim, warming the ashes of last night's fire. Clara sat upright, the woven blanket still over her shoulders, and for the first time in weeks, she did not wake to hunger gnawing alone. A rabbit bone lay clean beside the embers, proof of someone else's care. She whispered a wordless prayer, though she did not know who she prayed to anymore. The man appeared again in the days that followed, always at a distance, never near enough to frighten. He lingered at the edge of sight like a spirit, sometimes kneeling to set down a pouch of herbs, sometimes dropping a water skin by the fire. Clara's fear shifted slowly, step by hesitant step, into something else. She began to wait for him. When she found a rabbit roasting in the early light, she touched her belly and whispered, "Thank you." She did not know if he heard, but the wind carried her words into the trees. They met proper at last beneath a canopy of cottonwoods, where the stream bent and sparkled in the sun. Clara had been gathering berries when she felt his shadow at her back. She turned quick, her breath caught like a bird in a snare. He stood tall, silent, scar gleaming pale against the bronze of his cheek. His eyes, dark, steady, searched hers, not as a man appraises, but as one looks in a firelight, testing its warmth. She wanted to speak, to ask why he followed her, but her throat closed tight. He lowered his hand instead, palm open, holding a small bundle of leaves. With his other hand, he pressed his own side, showing her how to use them for pain. At last she understood medicine. Relief pricked her eyes. Slowly, she reached out and took them. Her fingers brushed his, calloused and warm. In return, with trembling hands, she untied the ribbon from her dress, the last scrap of color she owned, and placed it in his palm. He nodded once, solemn as a vow, then tucked it carefully into his vest. Time moved differently after that. She saw him more often. He spoke little, only gestures, but silence became its own language. She learned the way he set snares, the way he could find water by kneeling to taste the soil. He taught her to brew the herbs when the weight in her belly made her cry out at night. In those hours, shame loosened its grip. For every whisper of town gossip that still haunted her ears, there was a counterweight. His steady presence, his unspoken belief that she was worth tending to. When the child came, it came with thunder once more. Lightning cleaved the sky. Rain drummed on the roof of stone where they had taken shelter. Pain tore through Clara in waves, each one sharp enough to break her in half. She screamed, clutching the blanket between her teeth. Fear threatened to drown her. Fear of death, of the unknown, of being too young to bring life into this world. But Taza was there. He boiled water over a crackling fire, pressed a wet cloth to her brow. His hands, steady as stone, guided hers when she faltered. He did not flinch at the blood, nor turn away from her cries. He was silence, but he was strength. Hours stretched long as days until at last, with one final cry, a new sound filled the cave. A thin, piercing wail. A girl child. Clara collapsed back, sobbing from the pain, from the relief, from the sheer terror that it had ended and yet only begun. She felt weak, small, unworthy. Her tears fell like rain. But then Taza placed the swaddled infant into her arms. The baby's fist curled, her mouth searching. Clara gazed down, the storm still rumbling beyond the rocks. And for the first time since her exile, she did not feel abandoned. She felt chosen. News traveled fast in the west. Even hidden in the hills, Clara could not escape the tongues of men. Word reached a group of ranchers that the ruined girl had been found, sheltered by an Apache. To them, it was scandal-made flesh. They saddled their horses, spitting talk of sin and shame, and rode out to set things right. The day they came, Clara stood before the fire with her child against her chest. She saw the dust rising before she heard the hoofbeats. Her heart thudded like the drum of war. The men dismounted, boots sinking into the soft earth, their mouths twisted with judgment. They demanded she return, to face the town's punishment, to rid herself of her shame. Clara trembled, the baby's warmth pressed close to her. She had lived her whole life bowing beneath their stares, shrinking into silence. But not now. Her voice, though thin, carried through the still air. "No," she said. "I have a home now." Taza stepped forward then, silent as always, but his presence was iron. He carried no rifle in hand, no blade bared, yet his stillness spoke more than violence could. His scar caught the sunlight, his eyes unflinching. The ranchers shifted uneasily, muttered curses, spat into the dirt. But something in his quiet defiance made them falter. One by one, they turned away, climbing back into their saddles. They rode off, not in triumph, but in silence, unsettled by a strength they could not name. When the dust settled, Clara's knees gave way, and she wept, not from fear, but from the fierce relief of having chosen her place. Taza knelt beside her, not touching, only close enough that his shadow mingled with hers. The child stirred, breathing softly between them. That night the fire burned low, throwing long shadows against the canyon wall. Clara cradled her daughter, watching the baby's chest rise and fall. Across from her, Taza worked a small piece of wood with his knife, carving carefully, patiently, as though each stroke of the blade was an oath. The night was quiet, but her heart was no longer hollow. And if you listen close, closer than most ever dare, you can still hear her story in the whisper of those plains. Sometimes the world will cast you out, brand you unworthy, leave you to wander with nothing but shame for company. But shame is a lie told by the cruel. Dignity is not given by others. It is claimed in the quiet, in the fire you keep alive, in the hand that steadies you without words. Remember this, dear listener. Even in the loneliest wilderness, you are never beyond the reach of grace.